The New England colonies were first founded by religious dissenters who fled religious persecution in England. The two groups were the Pilgrims or Separatists that had separated completely from the Anglican Church in England because they had felt that the Anglican Church was still too similar to Catholicism, practicing similar rituals and whatnot. The Puritans, also unhappy with the Anglican Church, had remained part of the Anglican Church and were considered non-separatists, but really wanted to purify it along Calvinist values to truly make Anglican religion more of a Protestant form of religion based on John Calvin's principles. So the Pilgrims first settled in Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620. And over to the right on the map, you can see Massachusetts, which was established ultimately in 1630 when some of the colonies combined. Plymouth established 1620 earlier. So when we're talking about New England, we're really talking about Massachusetts Bay Colony after 1630. So the interesting thing about persecution in New England is that they had left England for religious freedom. The Pilgrims and the Puritans had fled to England and headed to the New World for this purpose. But ironically, they also practiced persecution and intolerance with people who disagreed with their religious views in New England. So the examples we'll talk about are Roger Williams, Anne Hutchinson, and the targeting of women during the Salem witch trials who were challenging the authority of the patriarchy in society. So Roger Williams had arrived in Massachusetts in 1631 as a young minister. He really made a name for himself because he was very much against mandatory church attendance and mandatory worship. He also believed that the church should be separate from the state. So the laws of Massachusetts Bay Colony should be separate from the church. And he was banished from Massachusetts for some of these beliefs that are considered pretty liberal, progressive beliefs at the time. He went on to found Rhode Island in 1636 based on the principles of religious toleration, but he himself was no longer welcomed in Massachusetts for his beliefs with religion regarding the state. And Hutchinson, another example of one who's persecuted for religious beliefs, shared her idea that one could be saved directly by God and really undermined the need for church, the religious practices, and good works, in saying that those were unnecessary. And what stood out the most was one's personal relationship and belief in God. Her beliefs, because she was getting quite a following and people were coming to her house, so her beliefs really threatened the ministers and the power structure within the church. She was arrested and forced to defend herself in court, ultimately was found guilty of sedition, which is to undermine the authorities, and was banished. And she moved to Rhode Island in 1638 because she was excommunicated from the colony and the church. The third example is the Salem witch trials that occurred in 1692 in New England. And the Puritans, like most people throughout Europe and much of the Christian world at this time, really believed in witchcraft and understood it to be a real phenomenon. So it wasn't unique that this happened, but the number of women that were accused and executed is truly phenomenal in a short amount of time. So women had often been targeted and blamed for misfortune. The Salem witch trials in particular began with the fits of these young girls that were making accusations of women in the community of being witches and were responsible for creating their fits that they were having. So ultimately, hundreds were accused in this mass hysteria of witchcraft throughout the colony, and some confessed to save their lives, but around 19 people were executed, not all of them women, but 15 were women, and this was very much because they were either challenging the patriarchal authority, the church authority in some way, because they were living independently and owning property, and their power, some of these women's power in society, presented a threat to the power structure that had existed. So another example of women in particular being persecuted during the time of the Salem witch trials in New England. At the same time, when they had come to the New World to escape persecution and pursue religious freedom, many of the Puritans and Puritan society in Massachusetts continued to oppress and persecute people who dissented or challenged the power structure at the time in any way.